So I believe if at any point you have any problems, just let me know. I'll stop. I can repeat what I said, or we can always come back and have a discussion if needed. Okay, someone's saying that it's going in and out. Please let me know if I'm audible to you all, or if I should just go ahead. I'm fine. Okay. All right. Thank you. So, thank you very much. Okay. So, well, honestly, it's an honor to be able to talk to so many of you students. The value that a student can bring into any issue that we are talking about, I think it's unmatched. And one of the main reasons why at any given opportunity we try not to miss engaging with students is the potential that we see in each of you. People often ask that what can students do? So our answer to that is that you don't have to be a wildlife scientist to be able to help conservation or climate change or other environmental issues. Being wherever you are, doing whatever you're doing, you can always contribute. So I'll come back to these issues a little later, but first let me take you through a few slides. It says 25 slides. Please don't get overwhelmed. It should be over in just a few minutes, and followed by this little PowerPoint. There'll be a short video that Deb is trying to get uploaded in time. And that's about what exactly do I do. So if I may say so, that from the president of the Kyrgyz Republic to the vice president of Afghanistan, from the deputy speakers and ministers from all snow leopard range countries, to the Secretary General of United Nations, from heads of institutions, international organizations such as United Nations Environment Programme, WWF, Snow Leopard Trust, Global Tiger Initiative, and so on, to celebrities which have an outreach to more than 50 million people across the world. This August, the August of 2017, saw one of the biggest ever aggregations of some very influential people coming together under one roof for snow leopard conservation in Bishkek, Kyrgyz Republic. That's where I live right now. For the first time, we were engaging with some of the biggest industry leaders from the region, which was a remarkable feat in itself, because when you talk about environmental issues or wildlife conservation issues, you often look at them as sitting on the other side of the fence. 5 years ago, if you would have asked me, or in fact anybody, that this is the level of support snow leopards would someday receive, I would have definitely laughed and rolled my eyes in disbelief. It's thanks to the leadership of champions, be it the president of the Kyrgyz Republic or the Prime Minister of Nepal. Today, what we call as the Global Snow Leopard and Ecosystem Protection Program is one of the most powerful alliances of governments, donors, partner organizations, field researchers, conservationists, and all of these people working together for one cause, that of conserving snow leopards and their ecosystems. Now, I'll show you in the next slide where snow leopards are found, and you'll be surprised to see that they're not among the most friendly countries. But when it comes to snow leopard conservation, these 12 countries where snow leopards are found are making unanimous decisions, and it's a huge development in many ways, including including international relations. People often ask us that uh, why should countries care about snow leopards? Why should donors be interested in it? Why should someone sitting far from the snow leopard mountains be interested in? In other words, why should even you be interested or even care about the snow leopard sitting where you are? So the answer is that because we all need water. As much as we need clean air, medicinal plants, biomass, fodder, and tens of other ecosystem services whose values exceed people's incomes by multiple times. These mountains, and I'm not exaggerating here, they provide water to billions of human beings living downstream in some of the world's most populous countries. The water that rivers bring from the Himalayas come all the way down till the start of the peninsula of India, which has nothing less than tens of millions of people, in fact hundreds of millions of people. So this is not a surprise. People need water, and these water towers are melting, and they're already robbing people of their ecosystem services. Now that's one of the reasons, and a fair enough reason for people to care. Over the last couple of decades, we are seeing that extreme events are on the rise, and they're hurting our economies. Be it the frequent occurrence of what they call as Jud. In other words, in English, it's called extreme winter. In Mongolia, it kills thousands of livestock. Go to Pakistan, you have flash floods. In other words, in different parts of these snow leopard mountains or these countries, people are seeing the changes in climate affect our economies in an unprecedented way. I'll give you an example shortly, but the picture that you see here is that of traditional Mongolian herder who would usually be able to sustain losses in these extreme winters once every 10 years or 15 years. Now in the last 3-4 years, it's happened already 3 times. So the amount of losses these people are facing are unprecedented. The seasonal patterns are changing. People, which is pushing people closer to the mountains, which they would otherwise never go to. These are the changes people are seeing and feeling the pressure of. These rapidly changing seasonal patterns are changing pastures and the way local communities use them. As I mentioned in the previous slide, they're moving closer to the mountains to compensate for losses due to climate change yet again. But these are the mountains which also have the snow leopard, and the snow leopard is the ambassador of these mountain ecosystems. Snow leopards are spread across 2 million square kilometers, and they move between international borders without visas or any passports. So, in other words, apart from being the true ambassadors of the mountains, they're like the thermometers of the health of the ecosystem where they live. So, to simplify it, if there is a mountain ecosystem or the mountain range which has snow leopards, then we know that it has enough prey has enough food, and the whole system is working. It's a functional ecosystem. So in other words, the presence of snow leopard as as an apex predator, it ticks like a thermometer that yes, the health of this particular ecosystem is all right. But the threats to snow leopards, we all know, are not reducing. On the other hand, they're actually diversifying. They're getting more intense and more diverse over time. For example, mining and infrastructure, which were not even listed about 15 years ago as threats to snow leopards, are now key threats to the snow leopards. it shows basically that we are moving closer to the mountains, where mountains are getting more accessible to people, be it for mines or roads or even trophy hunting, for that matter. Um, as ironical as it may sound, I mean, scientists have been studying snow leopards for the last 30 years or so, but the best estimates about snow leopard populations are nothing more than guesstimates, with a very small fraction of the snow leopard range of 2 million square kilometer ever studied for population. We don't even know how many snow leopards are there in the mountains. We only keep guessing there could be as few as 3,500 or as many as about 10,000 or so. So from delineating landscapes where people can work by preparing, climate smart management plans, uh, committing resources, and helping make snow leopard conservation a mainstream issue and not letting it remain something that we only do when we're done with all the destruction, we're done with all the quotes unquote development. I think that has been one of the primary challenges and the primary successes of the global snow leopard program. And we have an array of partners which include international organizations. USAID, for instance, has been one of our strongest supporters for a lot of this work which is happening in the snow leopard mountains. Incidentally, well, it's no surprise, but snow leopards cannot vote, unfortunately, and they cannot vote against policies or practices that hurt them or their habitats. But you, when you grow up, you can. Your teachers can. Your families can. Your elder friends can. So the idea is that to start with, this is where we can make a difference by reaching out to hundreds of thousands of people across the world to build a stronger constituency of the snow leopards and the mountains where they live. And it's not just because it's a beautiful species. It's not just because it's a charismatic looking animal. It's also because it serves as an ambassador of these mountains, as a thermometer of these mountains. It is an indicator of the health of the whole ecosystem, and so on. And then the amount of services that snow leopard and its ecosystem provide to the local people living or sharing their spaces, not even sharing the spaces, even those living downstreams, is many, many times than what we have ever been able to evaluate. So I think that's all I have for now. Yeah, no, just a fun picture, and what I really wanted to depict here is that it's easy to take off, but it's very difficult to continue and persist and move on. The program that I just showed you about has taken off. We are seeing a lot of interest from various spheres of life, from politicians, from business people, from researchers, from students, and so on. But then it takes a lot more effort. It requires a lot more effort for it to sustain. And hopefully we'll be able to continue. Honestly, if I am reaching out to 500 of you wonderful students, then I think it's a very important step in making that right outreach to the people who will be the future future voters, and carry the flag further. So I'll stop with this presentation here. Deb, if you could kindly bring up the video. I'll just let you know the video is it's something I have my voice recorded over it, so I don't think I'll need to speak. We can watch the video, but this video is essentially something I've tried to put because people often ask us that, what do you do? And When I tell them I'm a wildlife scientist, I study snow leopards, it's not a usual job of being a doctor or a teacher or an engineer. It's a little different. So I've tried to put a little video together. Please go. It's a 5-minute video. I think it should get over very soon. But once it's over, then I'll be here to try and answer your questions if you have any. Yeah, it'll be a pleasure to interact with you all further. So Debbie, you may please switch on the video and please check if the volume is correct, is all right. I'm an ecologist who works with an organization that studies and conserves snow leopards in their natural home. They say, wow, that's great, but what do you do? So I tell them about the snow leopard, which is a gorgeous, charismatic, and incredibly elusive species. I tell them how the species has all the support from evolution to be perfectly suited for the job of living, hunting, and breeding in the high mountains of Central and South Asia. I try to tell them how similar a real snow leopard is to the super cat Tai Lung. That's great, but still, what do you do? So I decided to put a little video together showing what exactly do I do. To show that, I'll have to take you out of your school. In fact, out of the United States, because there are no wild snow leopards there. I'll take you to the other side of the world. There are just about 4,000 to 7,000 snow leopards in the world, and they're spread over 2 million square kilometers. I'm going to take you along to Kyrgyzstan on a recent field trip that we made to a remote area, the Sarychat-Ertash Reserve. Situated in the Tian Shan Mountains, Sarychat is a fine snow leopard habitat. I was particularly excited about this field trip since for once I was not going to hike those treacherous mountains, but instead I was supposed to ride a Pajero. Not the four-wheeled one, but the four-legged one. My horse was named Pajero. 8 of us, including the 4 horses, were planning to survey the mountains. Our first camp was about 17 kilometers from where we left our car and required us to cross a high pass at about 4,500 meters elevation. The weather was great and we saw a lot of wildlife on our way, including thousands of argali. Argali is a beautiful mountain sheep and is also the main food of snow leopards in these mountains. These horses are incredible creatures. They're like an all-terrain bike, but with an autopilot function. Since one does not always have to look ahead to be alive, they allow you to look around and cherish the wildlife and the landscape. Pajero's good friend was Michael Jackson. He had this peculiar habit of walking backward, almost as if moonwalking. In the next several days, we set up several camera traps in the mountains. But to set up a camera trap that takes snow leopard pictures, we need to first behave like one. Getting down on 4 is almost always rewarding. We set up more than 40 cameras in an area bigger than the size of New York City. These cameras were to provide opportunity to all the snow leopards take their own selfies and participate in the count. Not just snow leopards, but several other animals would take their selfies too. So this was the work bit. Now some exciting stuff. On our way back, as we were climbing the pass after setting our last camera, the weather turned ominous and we were in the middle of a snowstorm. Despite wind speeds exceeding 100 kilometers per hour, these rock-hardy horses kept us going on. With temperatures several degrees below freezing, my colleague Kuban was looking like a snowman. It is alright to be scared in such situations, but for some reason, Kuban and I kept taking selfies. We both had families and friends back home to boast this snowstorm to. In a few hours, I was wearing a snow crown and snow earrings that would have made me look like a beauty queen had I been 1,000 times prettier. To match my ornamentation, Mr. Pajero gave a run for his money to T-800 of Terminator 2. The storm had lasted nearly 4 hours, which was the time it took us to cross the pass as well. Once down, Pajero and I had begun to understand each other telepathically. In the meanwhile, the cameras continued to take pictures of snow leopards, documenting some incredible behavioral insights into the secret world of the elusive snow leopard. For instance, this snow leopard went grocery shopping from her penthouse only to return with a marmot, something that was never documented before. This was a small window into a part of what we do as wildlife ecologists in a workplace where no two workdays are ever the same. This is also what helps us make friends from some of the most beautiful parts of the world. And I have the mighty snow leopard to thank for all of this. Thank you so much for listening through it. But yeah, so in case any of you have questions, I think we can have interactive session, right, if needed. I'll be more than happy to answer questions if any of the students would like to ask any questions. Okay, I'll go one by one. So I did my PhD in Central India, which is a flat part of the country, and there are no snow leopards there. And while I was studying a prey species, a small antelope, I was working with researchers who were studying tigers. So yes, I have studied tigers before I kind of moved up into the mountains to study snow leopards. Okay, the other question is, how long have you been studying wildlife? This is a question by Melanie. So I've been working, I've been studying wildlife since 2000 or something, but I have to tell the story. I have a master's in physics, and then I did my PhD in zoology. The reason I was in physics was because I liked the ability of the subject to answer some basic questions about how things work, why is what is going on, and so on. So essentially, just once, I missed your question. It just went up. Beg your pardon. Yeah. So that's why. So but I started in 1995 when I was in school, and a group of foresters came and took us to a nature camp, and that's where I got my first interaction with the wilderness. And I think I almost was certain that this is all I want to do in life. Yes, it took a lot more effort than just imagining that you'll be able to do something. But as I was interested since 95 onwards, but it's only in 2002 that I was able to formally start studying wildlife. Okay, the next question is by Donna. When was their fur banned? So there is an international consortium which is called Convention for International Trade in Endangered Species, and for almost 20 years, any trade in any parts of snow leopard's body, be it fur or bones or organs, is banned. So it's been banned for definitely for 20 years. And all the snow leopard range countries, which start from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and then there's India, Nepal, Bhutan, China, all the way to Russia, all the countries have very strict rules and regulations against poaching snow leopards. It is an endangered species, yes. The classifications keep changing, so right now they call it vulnerable under the threatened category. Why do I like leopards? This is a question by Melanie again. Well, just look at this guy. Aren't they gorgeous? But to be honest, the reason I like snow leopards is because they have this magical ability of melting in the background, and you know there is a snow leopard right there, but you won't see it. They are so good at the camouflage is so good that it might be right in front of you, but you might not get to see it. And then they climb up and down these mountains, which I or any human can physically never achieve. So this distance that they have maintained between humans and snow leopards, where snow leopards have this evolutionary advantage, I think that fascinates me a lot, which is where we try to use technology to be able to understand them. So like these cameras that you just saw in that video, these are like our eyes in the mountains, and physically it's almost impossible to see snow leopards. In the last 10 years or so that I've been working with snow leopards, in the true wilderness, like, walking and suddenly I encounter a snow leopard, I've seen it only twice. May have seen it thousands of times on camera traps, a few times when we are putting radio collars on them, but that's how rare it is to see snow leopards. And that's what probably gets me interested in them, that, it's just that little excitement about they're not easy to see or study. Altitude ecologist, I'm not quite sure. So the ID from where it comes is NS. I'm not sure if I said that. I'm sorry if I did. I meant to say snow leopard ecologist. Yes. So I don't know of a term altitude ecologist. I'm sorry if I have mispronounced it somewhere. When did I get interested in snow leopards? This was towards the end of my PhD. Because of my interest in physics, I used to be slightly better than biologists in numbers, and they were looking for developing new techniques to monitor snow leopards. So that's where I got engaged in one of the projects, and then, in 2005 and 6, I got slightly involved in snow leopards, but by 2007, I joined the Snow Leopard Trust to start working with them. Another animal to study. So there's a small animal called four-horned antelope. You might need to search it on the internet, but do look it up. It's a small animal, weighs just about 20 kilos, or maybe about 45 or 50 or 60, 50, 55, 50, 60 pounds. Yeah, I'm in love with that animal. It's the only animal in the world which has 4 distinct horns, and it has the most beautiful eyes you can ever see. Again, the species was never studied before because it's got this ability to become invisible in the forests and then in the tropical dry forests of India and Nepal. So yes, so that's the other species I would probably go to, if not the snow leopards. Melanie asks, what was the coolest thing you saw the snow leopards do? Their ability to jump and to climb these mountains almost effortlessly, and their ability to just become invisible. There is a snow leopard right in front of you, but you don't get to see it. I think that's most fascinating and the coolest thing about snow leopards. The first time I saw a snow leopard, that was quite an exciting encounter. So you see in front of you, just behind the snow leopard, there is that little ridge. So I and a colleague of mine and 2 other students, we were walking that ridge line, and we saw a dead ibex in the valley bottom. And when we saw the ibex and the way it was killed and the way its gut was taken out, it looked very evident that it's the job of a big cat. Now, of course, in South Gobi, there is no other big cat but the snow leopard. So we thought maybe we might be lucky today to see a snow leopard. So I stood on the ridge, and my colleague, he went around and close to the dead ibex, and suddenly, with a little whiff of air, I see a snow leopard just jumps up and comes right in front of me on this ledge, and it makes this big round eyes, almost as if saying, "How did you get so close to me without me getting to know that?" And it was surprising for him because the snow leopard thought he's invisible, and when it just thought it might be able to escape this friend of mine who was close to the ibex kill, he got a bit surprised and shocked. But the first thing it did was look at me, turn around, and just quietly, a bit hurriedly, just walk away. So yeah, I can't. I can never forget the scars that it had on its face. It was a big male, must have fought many battles to maintain and sustain its territory. And that little 3 second interaction I had with him, of him asking how, hey human, how are you so close to me, and me just like, wow, you're just so amazing. I think that's yeah. So that was my first encounter with a snow leopard in the wild. Oh, we keep seeing funny pictures of snow leopard, Myra. Uh, there are times where when these cameras, they have a slightly glossy flashlight, so at times you can see your own reflection. So there are times when cubs, they just walk in front of a snow leopard, they just walk in front of this snow leopard camera and see their own reflection and make these funny faces also. So that's pretty hilarious at times to see. But then one very interesting episode was when we had a snow leopard come in front of a camera, and I think it was a place where it was getting some shelter from the strong wind. So it slept right in front of the camera, and then its tail came right on its head, and it used it as a warmer to sleep. I think we got thousands of pictures of that sleeping snow leopard in front of the camera. But then, yeah, that was fun. That was exciting. Have you been to the Himalayas? Yes, Melanie, I've been to the Himalayas. That's where I got my first encounter of working with snow leopards. Not a snow leopard. I've not seen a snow leopard in the Himalayas, but yes, that was my first. That was the first time I went to a snow leopard habitat. Physics must come to you with okay. Must help you with camera placement. Yes, Donna, it does help me with camera placement. It helps me understand what the sun will do if it reflects at a certain angle. How will the sensor behave with a certain direction of the sun? So yes, it does help for sure. Yeah. Melanie asks, have you ever felt threatened or unsafe while doing your job? The only time I felt threatened or unsafe was when I did not know who are the humans around me, who those humans will be, or are they robbers, or are they smugglers? Yeah, so I get nervous in the mountains when I see people who I don't know, because you don't know what they can come up with wildlife. And I've worked with tigers, and I can tell you that I've seen tigers when I've been on foot, but I've felt much more confident that the tiger is not interested in me as its food. But I'm never sure about people when I see them in the mountain or the forest. What is their interest? So that's the only time I feel unsafe or threatened. Have you ever had a dangerous experience in the mountains, or it's always peaceful? So you just saw the video, right? A few minutes ago. That's how dangerous it can get. We were walking in waist-deep snow, and if the snowstorm lasted another 4 hours, it could have been a bit dangerous. But thankfully, I was not alone. Thankfully, I had people, and most gratefully, I had that horse with me. It almost felt like a buddy when I was walking there, to have someone with me, and yeah, that kind of took away the fear. There are dangers for sure. I mean, I didn't mention it here, but we lost one of our colleagues to unknown people who attacked him. He unfortunately passed away, but and people suspect that it was because he was working in an area where there were some people who had other interests or whatever. So it can get dangerous at times, but I think you can more or less know what wildlife is about. If you understand animal behavior, if you do the right things, if you respect them, maintain that distance between you and these wild animals, then I think you're far more safe than otherwise. Ever found a herd snow leopard? Yes, we have. There is a very painful video you can look up on internet where a snow leopard is trapped in a very bad snare, and it's limping away with the snare in its foot. We've also seen one snow leopard which was in a trap, and it was in a trap for a few days, so its leg was in a very bad shape. So the leg had to be partly amputated. But the snow leopard still survived for a few weeks after that. But we don't know what happened after that because the collar was destroyed. So we do see herd snow leopards. In fact, angry people, when local community people, they get upset with snow leopards killing their livestock, they at times go out and set up these snares, or sometimes they attack, they kill snow leopards with a gun. And so that's when they get hurt, and this is one of the primary threats snow leopards face. Melanie is asking, do they have any predators? Not quite. I mean, snow leopard is the top predator, but yes, if there is a big pack of wolves, then they can threaten a snow leopard. We have seen a very disturbing set of images of big Tibetan Mastiff dogs, kind of encircling a snow leopard and threatening it. So yes, these big dogs or wolves, when they are in bigger packs, they can be a predator to the snow leopard also. Kathleen is asking, have you ever got altitude sickness while doing your job? Absolutely. I think, not that bad. It didn't get that bad because the moment I was beginning to feel a little too nauseous, I just came down a few 100 meters in altitude, came down to a lower village in the Himalayas, so that controlled it pretty well. But yes, it's a very common thing to happen. All you need to do is go slow, give your body enough time to acclimatize to these thin air, and I think you should be okay. How long do you usually spend on your trips? How long, as in how much time? So it depends what work you are going out for. These camera trapping trips are typically between 1 to 3 week long. So you might be there for any time between 7 to 20-25 days in the mountains. But when you're doing collaring or when you're doing some more intensive field work, then you might need to be in the mountains for a few months at a stretch. Do you ever use drones to track the snow leopards? We are trying to, because these are difficult mountains and the winds are not very predictable all the time. It's an area which is still not which is still underdeveloped. We're trying to develop, to partner with some companies which work on robotics. We're partnering with Microsoft on this as well to develop drones that can help monitor not just snow leopards but also poachers and their prey also. So yes, that's the next big technological leap the world is seeing right now, and we're trying to catch up on that as well. Melanie's asking, did you always know that you wanted to be a scientist? No. I think when I was very young, I wanted to be a pilot. Then I wanted to, at some point, everyone wants to be a player, right? Whatever is your favorite sport. So a few years I wanted to play that sport. But then, of course, when I went for the first time to a forest and spent 3 or 4 days in a nature camp, experiencing it firsthand, experiencing the wilderness, the wildlife, seeing wild animals, seeing the trees, living with them for 3 days, I think that's when I started making up my mind that this is what I want to do. So yes, snow leopards are almost always alone. The only time you will see more than one snow leopard together is either when they're mating. So the males look for females, and females also actively look out for males. and they come together for a few weeks. So you might see them together sometime around that period. The other time you will see them together is when a mother has cubs, and cubs stay with their moms for about a year and a half, sometimes even up to 2 years. So if you see a mother with grown-up 2 or 3 other snow leopards, they could all be her cubs, or they could be her sister, or her sister and her cubs also. So while they preferably stay alone, there are times when you can see them in smaller groups, very small groups, like more than one is like 2 or 3. Sometimes there's only one record of a snow leopard in a group of 5 that we have, and that's the biggest we have ever seen them on a camera trap. How many babies do they have at a time? It varies between 1 and 3. Typically, new moms, new mothers, they usually have 1 cub, but typically they will have between 2 and 3 cubs. One female in Mongolia, central Mongolia, we know for sure she had 4 cubs, and all of them kind of grew up a little bit. So yeah, they can have up to 4 cubs also. Donna's asking, do they have specific illnesses? They surely do. There are certain times when we see snow leopards with damaged skin, or unwell snow leopard which is unable to hunt. So yes, they do have illnesses. There are certain viral infections that are common in snow leopards as well. But again, not much is known about the diseases in the wild, which is again a big threat, not just to the snow leopards but to livestock and also humans. We don't know what all viruses and bacteria are lurking around in the wilderness areas. So that's another aspect of research which is very prominently being taken up right now. Do you know when their mating seasons are? Yes, so it's typically towards the end of the winter, because then what happens is when they have when they mate towards the end of the winter, after 3 months cubs are born. So they're born in late spring, which is a relatively easier season. So nature has its wonderful ways of taking care or making sure the right things happen at the right time. Have you ever been injured on your travels? Yeah, I've sprained my leg a few times, almost incapacitating me for a few weeks. But that's about it. I'm not, fortunately, never been seriously injured. But you keep falling. I have a record that whenever I climb a mountain on my way back, I will slip and fall a few times. So that's very common with me. What is your most memorable moment working with these animals? There are so many. I think my most memorable moment was that interaction with that snow leopard when I saw it right next to me. But then, what really is special is when you work in these mountains and make friends with local people, and that some of the most amazing people live in these snow leopard mountains. So that is also very special, and I mean, I cherish my time spent with the local communities, with them, drinking tea with them, or eating, meals cooked together and things like those. Kathleen's asking, have you ever seen snow leopard cubs in the zoo? Yes. In the wild? No. On camera traps? Yes. Yes, Melanie, I do get paid. So it really, that's a very sweet and a very practical question. Good that you asked it. Yes, so as a researcher, one starts low. One might start low as a student because student stipends are typically low and they vary. So the salaries that a snow leopard researcher living in the US might be drawing might be different than what she or he might draw when he is or she is living in, say Mongolia, for example. But typically, if you are good at your work, you could make in excess of 30,000-40,000 a year. So yes, and that's just what you take home, and then there are other perks. So let me put it this way. Yes, I may not be earning as much as maybe a doctor might be of my age, but or maybe as an engineer of my age, but then I find myself much happier because I'm earning for my hobby, right? So that's a huge difference. There's a very famous saying that make your hobby your profession and you'll never work your life. And if you don't work, then you don't get exhausted with what you're doing and you just keep doing what you love all the time. So that's what gets me going. But please be aware that yes, we do get paid and we get paid reasonably well. How old were you when you started this job? I was about 26. Yeah, I started working on wildlife research when I was about 24, 25. That's when I started. How fast do snow leopards run? I wouldn't remember exactly what speed at which they run because they don't really need to run too long. They just climb down at speed in the mountains, or they just rapidly just scale up the mountains. So speed is really not what they're interested in. Surprise and the ability to run through these extremely treacherous slopes is what their key strength is. How do you tell the difference between the male and the female? So typically with all the cats, you can see the testicles. So with the males, you can see them pretty prominently. But because of the fur, it's not always easy. But if you have a snow leopard which is in front of a camera for a while, you can identify male from female. Have there ever been twin snow leopards? Oh, all cubs. Whenever a mother gives birth to more than one cub, they're all twins, right? Or sometimes there are these triplets, and then they also have quadruplets. So, how small is the gene pool for the snow leopards? Now, that's a very good question, and interestingly, in the last few years, there has been a bit of work about the gene pool of snow leopards, and it looks like it's not as narrow or as small as we would have thought it to be. The population itself across the snow leopard range can be classified into 3 subpopulations, which means there is sufficient diversity maintained in their gene pool. Do you plan where you are going to sleep, or do you travel and then find a spot? It depends. It really depends. There are times we have had to just find a spot. I remember especially the trips to Tajikistan, where we were just exploring a new snow leopard habitat and trying to figure out where to do surveys. We were carrying our tents and we were traveling, and we found some, it turned dark. We set up a tent, slept there, next morning started again. But then there are times when you know that you're going for a certain survey, you can come back to your base camp or to a certain herder's house or a tent or wherever. So it really depends. It's not always that we are going out extempore and looking for a new site to sleep over, but yes, there are times we have to do that. What do they eat? So you remember I showed you those argali in that video? Argali is one of the many foods, but typically snow leopards they eat a lot of ibex. In the Himalayas, they eat another species called the blue sheep. It's also called a bharal. It's a beautiful sheep which has, when you see it from a distance, it gets a little bluish, grayish tinge in its color, in its coat. So these are its primary prey. Snow leopards are also known to chew on certain herbs. in these mountains. There's a special herb which called as myricara. Often you see them in the scat. That there's a lot of twigs and leaves of myricara. Have you ever seen snow leopards in the wild at nighttime? No, I haven't. I might like to believe that there was once something on a ridge where I pointed my torch and I could see those two eyes looking at me, but yeah, by the time I could get closer to get a better look, it had vanished. So I would like to believe it was a snow leopard, but I'm not sure if it was a snow leopard. How long do they live? So we don't really, I mean, in the zoos, if you ask me, we know that they live up to 14, 15, sometimes even up to 20 years. But in the wild, we have some studies uh, uh, based on several years of camera trapping and telemetry. So typically their age is about 8 to 9 years is on an average how long they survive in the wild. What type of work environment are you in when you're not in the wild? You see it right behind. So um, field work is really not the most important part of what we do, but it's not it seldom consumes more than 50% of our time. In fact, about 30 to 40% of our time we are out in the field. The rest of the time we are working on computers with our data, planning, reporting, fundraising, talking to wonderful people like yourself, and so on. So yeah, I mean, all our country offices, wherever we're working, they're based in urban cities. We do have field offices, but there's good computing abilities, internet, electricity. These are very important to make use of all the valuable data that you collect in the field and synthesize it into something valuable. Have there been known attacks? Donna asks. No, only one or two rare cases where a snow leopard has been cornered in a house or in a fenced area where it may have attacked in its bid to escape. But other than that, they're very gentle animals. Melanie's asking, do different leopards have different patterns? Absolutely, and very good observation. So their patterns are like fingerprints, and these are the patterns based on which we are able to tell how many snow leopards in an area could be there. Even though we wouldn't be able to count each of them, this is how we are able to do some scientific modeling and statistical modeling to give a better prediction of how many snow leopards could be there in an area. How old are those cubs? They call cubs, not kittens. They're big cats, Melanie, when they leave their parents. So they leave their mother at the age of around 1.5 to 2 years. Till that time, they're and even later sometimes they're almost entirely dependent on the mother to make the kill. But by the time they're about a year and a half, they're big enough and they start exploring, making their own kills. Sometimes they're successful, which is great. But then when they're unsuccessful, there's a mother who's already making a kill for the cub. So that's what really works for a cub growing up and slowly finding its way out away from the mother. Melanie is asking, what are your other hobbies? I love cooking. I find it very rewarding because when you do research, any research, it takes years for results to come by. But when you cook, and if at all you cook reasonably okay, then it's like instant nirvana. So you cook and you can enjoy and cherish it right there. So I love that instant nirvana bit of cooking, and that's one of my hobbies, other than photography and swimming and cycling. Okay, I think we have had a stop to the questions. I loved answering these questions. Thank you so much for asking such wonderful, wonderful questions. Thank you, Brittany, for your time, and thank you everybody for such a lively discussion and interaction. Thank you, Deb. Thank you. Do visit. Where is that? I can. Should I type it somewhere? Do visit our website and try to follow us on social media if you do any of it. But at least the website you should definitely visit. It's called snowleopard.org, and you can look on Twitter. We are Snow Leopards. Mine is Koustunh Sharma, and yeah, the same similar things you can look up and you'll find them very easily. So thank you so much. Thank you, and I must say it's an honor to talk to you all, and I have very high hopes from each of you. The amount of enthusiasm you guys have shown, it's just phenomenal. Just makes us feel so good that you know the next batch coming in who will run the world are so much brighter, smarter, capable than the current batch of people. So that's the most encouraging thing here that I see. I will do that, Deb. I'll send you these details on your email. Great. So do I just what next? Should I just sign out or what do we do? Okay. Thank you so much, Deb. It's been a pleasure talking to you all. Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a good day, you all.